people, nature preserve people, just leave it, let it lay, let it go back to nature. That's the way I felt as well, until I saw the amount that we had. And if we get smaller storms like we had 10 years ago, I would still do that. I would still just cut, let it go to debris. We just can't do that here. There's no way. You might as well close the park and let it be invaded with invasives. That was the decisions we had to make. So we went up north with a friend of mine and Rich Dunbar, and we looked at a couple of properties, private forests, and we compared. There was one where they let it go, but that had been hit really hard like we had. Not as big, not as many acres, but the same percentage of woodland was hit. And then another one that was logged out after the same amount of damage. So we got to compare how the regrowth was looking. How were the saplings responding, which ones had more invasives, things like that, and taking into account. They were both in the same kind of soil types, you know, things like that, just trying to really figure it out. Because you have to know, state nature preserves would never allow loggers unless they absolutely had to. And so they took it very seriously with this. Initially, I've not seen them since, but initially they took it very seriously. So one of the requirements was that if we were going to allow loggers, we had to have a company that had a feller buncher. I learned what a feller buncher was. So a feller buncher, it's on a track system. So it's not on a skid steer system with the big tires, big tractor tires that are going to pit the soil. It tracks across the top, and unless it turns, which this thing can turn all the way around. This whole thing, you can sit there and they can move it all the way around. So he can literally go up there, and there's a big blade here. There's 4 steel arms there that grab it, grab it, and lay it down whichever direction. If it's too big for that, he can kind of guide it down, okay? And there were some that were too big. Now these are the trees that are out front. We asked for him to take these out specifically. There was a lot of tops broken out here that were going to fall, so we wanted to get that taken out. This one is still out front. You can see the stumps. This one was actually over, and they pushed it back up, but it was already, the roots were popped and everything, so we had it ground down. So we barely got it through the gate. That was the day it came. And I let Mike do that. I was like, I'm not responsible. It was like an inch on either side to get through that gate with this thing. And we had 2 lumber companies that could do it because all the other ones I contacted did not have a feller buncher. They did rough and tumble skid steer work, and they weren't as concerned as we were about what could come up afterwards. Although I've got to say, it doesn't matter in some areas. They're so inundated with logs. By the time we remove that, you just can't help but disturb things. So that was the first log that was loaded. It was a little cottonwood, of course, for Fox Island cottonwood. And they're a pallet company, so they love cottonwood. They have a running contract with the steel factory, and they have to specially custom make pallet things to hold the steel, and they'll even wrap them and things like that. So we got a tour of the lumber facility, Graver Lumber, and they use every part of it. They even have a mulching system for the bark or anything falls off. Everything gets ground up and has a kind of a natural spray color that they use on it. And so we like that. We like that they were going to use every bit of it. We had a lot to do as educators. We had to cancel all of our programs. We had to cancel because they couldn't come in the park. You know, we had to cancel even any public program. We didn't want anybody in here. It was just a nightmare. We had to notify the public media, tell them what our decisions were, keep them updated, and so we've continued to do that as much as we can. And then I met with not only Rich Dunbar of Indiana State Nature Preserves, but Tom Crow, Crow Forestry, donated his time. He's a forester as well, but he has no equipment that we could, you know, safely use here, and they're kind of a smaller forestry company, but he's been in the business for 30 years, and he donated a lot of time at just giving us advice and kind of walking us through, hey, I would do this or that. I remember at one time I walked out here and we had the loggers go through and I was just like, ugh. And he goes, you need to have them take out that tree and that tree. And I'm like, wait a minute, we have to take out more trees? And he says, well, if you want to not grow cottonwood in this area, if you want to, you know, diversify this habitat, make it a better wildlife diversity habitat, and get some oaks in there, you got to open it up a little bit more. If you don't, you let them seed in, regenerate, and we've done both. There's just like a 3-acre spot out here that we've opened up, and then another 3.5-acre spot over that way that we're opening up, that has been opened up, that we will replant. The rest of it is just regenerating on its own. And then I met with Bill Lambert. He's an area easement specialist, also an avid birder. So if you're a birder and you don't know Bill Lambert, you need to get to know him. But he works with private landowners on getting them to put their acreage into farm, and you know, that they can get paid federal money to have a forest put in or things like that. And so he works with the landowners to teach them how to do that. So he came out and walked through with Tom Crow and I and gave us some specialist information. I had the state forester, of course, out, the district police forest. What I learned is that state nature preserves understand herbaceous layers of the forest, the wildflowers, the lower level wildflower, native flowers, the native grasses. They may not understand the forests. So I had to talk to the forest, who didn't really understand the herbaceous layer. They kind of specialize in each, so you have to talk to both when you're in this situation. And I talked to a lot of other experts. You might recognize Ben Hess's name, Nate Simon, of Blue Heron Ministries, and they do a lot of restoration work, trying to get rid of invasive plants and then restoring them to native plants. Nathan Pugh of Heartland Restoration as well. So we talked to a lot of people. So then we began logging. The remaining staff, we maintained basically the gate so that the loggers could get in and out. And then the buildings and landscaping and all that stuff was all growing still. So we were doing that. And then, like, I would eventually get asked to come to this race. We're going to benefit Fox Island, give you $3,400 for restoration work. And they ran a 5K at Matea. And runners are great. They're great. So they donated on top of their registration fees. You know, a lot of things were put into that. And then Healy Hand Spa and Boutique. I don't know if you guys remember Soul Fest here at Fox Island. So Sarah Loshi, she owns Healing Hand Spa Boutique, and she's a big Soul Fest person, loves it. We haven't been able to do it due to floods, due to COVID, due to whatever, and she wanted to bring it back. We didn't want it anymore. We obviously don't have this time to deal with that. So she ran a Soul Fest at Parkview Field, which she learned cost her a lot more money than she thought it would. But they did donate 100% of the profits to restoration efforts here at Fox Island. And they're probably going to do it again, well, they will do it again in June at Matea. So we've offered in the facility. They're just going to do their thing. And they might talk to Jeff about helping Matea with some restoration work as well that needs to be done there. Not from the storm, but other things. So, and, you know, we had a lot of private donors too. You know, that people would just send in a $20 check or $50 check or $100 check. That money is still, a lot of it's still sitting there. We're waiting to use it for various restoration efforts, which I'll talk about really quick. So this is what, we just cleaned this whole area out, and then they decided, well, this is something else I learned. The lumber yard needs to be in the grass, not out here in the parking lot, because it just rips up what parking lot that you have. And so that became lumberyard number 1. And so that was new. None of our structures were hit. The house, this building, gazebo even, none of that was damaged from the storm. So we were very fortunate in that way. This was the center, this is the center yard, which you guys will kind of walk past that to get to the main trail when you do the IMN geology class. They're going to take you down the main trail up to the dune. And you'll see the geo garden, which is a huge, geology rock garden. And you'll see that that's all cleaned up, but it's also now been converted to a lumber yard. So it's all ripped up. And the other thing I was told by Ben and Tom is after they log an area, you need to go through there and do some foliar treatments of the invasives, just to try to knock them down so they won't seed out this year. It may not kill them, it might kill them. If they're really big, probably just going to knock them back. And it gives you more time to get in there and do a cut stump treatment on them, maybe next year or something like that. The idea of just keeping the stuff from seeding, okay, and producing berries for birds to spread. So we did a lot of that. This was donated by Graber Lumber after we had already contracted them, which I thought was really super nice of them. This is the machinery I used, and that's the Fecon head that rips up the honeysuckle or autumn olive or whatever invasive I'm going after. That was what the lake road looked like if I went like that. There were 68 trees down just the lake road from the four-way back to the lake road, which devastated all of our summer people. People wanted to come down and say, can we just get to the lake? No, you can't. And this whole edge of the woods was full, because they like to be in the edge, all the invasive shrubs, they like to get to the sunlight. And it was just full of honeysuckle mainly, but there was a lot of autumn olive there as well. And so I was able to mulch and get to a lot of that. Again, in 2-3 years, I have to do a foliar treatment of all the resprout that'll happen. So if you think you can do invasive management without use of herbicide, I wish you luck. I've tried it. They resprout, and you'll have 20 sprouts where you could have just treated the stump and been done without spraying herbicide or killing all the amphibians. So these are the 2-3 acre spots that will be planted in the woods where you saw when you came in. The big debris piles is one of them, and then further that way towards the gun club's another. This is the lake road, and so this is the 12 acres that will be planted with trees north of the lake road. We might expand that area eventually, like the following year we might plant some more further out. We don't know until we start that process, which should begin in April.
Where's the nature center?
So this is the main road you guys came in. Well, you came in this way. There's the nature center. So there's the four-way, and then the lake road's here. Okay. So this field, and this field, and this field was almost 100% honeysuckle. When I went through there, I was just like, oh my word. You'd see it from the trail, but you don't really realize. And so I would go through that and just bunch it all up, and if I saw a dogwood patch, I left the dogwood patch. If I saw oak trees, I left them, of course. What we will do in these areas is in about 2-3 years, I'll hit the resprout, then we'll drill seed in grasses first, and then eventually we could add some forbs if we wanted, add some more oak trees, but it's going to be years down the road. But woodcock loves nesting and singing and doing the sky dance from this particular section, I know. And so I'm really concerned about that, but I'm also thinking we're improving that habitat greatly. It doesn't have as much cover, though, this year. So during all of this, we had one full-time park manager, one full-time maintenance foreman, one full-time environmental educator who I asked to do programming at Matea or Eagle Marsh or wherever they would give them a site. One part-time maintenance person, one part-time receptionist working just 3 days a week, basically to get the loggers in and out, and another part-time receptionist, Pam George, on Mondays just to get the loggers in and out at the gate. So they've spent the winter at the gatehouse letting loggers in and out. We've never had the gatehouse open in the winter. It's just not been a thing. So, and again, the equipment we had to begin with was 1 to 2 garden tractors. We had a gator, which does not do good in the woods. Does really good on fields and trails. Does not do good in the woods. And we borrowed an RTV from Matea that did do a lot better in the woods. They now have it back. And we have, of course, a work truck And we borrowed a county highway payloader, which is a really big machine that's too heavy to actually have on the trails or in the woods. So I think the only trail it went down was north of the lake road that could hold its weight and not completely sink. And so we needed a lot of equipment. You know, we hadn't had a need for it ever. So we have a track loader now that has a grappling hook that can grab debris and move it. And we have a bucket to where we can regrade things like trails and things like that. Because when they're opening trails, they're also dragging logs down the trails when they're done. And so the skid steers, the big tire things, grab the trees and drag them down the trails, which creates this huge pit in the middle of the trail. So you have to regrade that out. And so you'll see a lot of that when you guys go down the main trail. You'll see kind of where they've graded over and over again to try to keep that level. Because if you don't, every time it rains, which by the way, it has rained almost every week this winter, it fills with water and creates a lot of problems for loggers to get in and out. And they've not been in for a couple weeks now because of that, because they can damage the structure of the soil, the dunes, things like that if they're out there and it's just a muddy mess. So I wanted to give you kind of a history of what it used to be here in Fox. I don't know if you guys could see that, but there is no main roads yet. This is 1938. This is a farm field, right? Farm fields all the way across the front of the park. Back here, there's even a farm field. This is where Serval's at, so that's not us. So this would probably be close to the main trail. Yeah, maybe over here. And these are the dune trees. So we do have trees growing on the dune in 1938. And so a lot of those were black oaks, some tulips, sassafras. We have some idea of what those would have been. And this is in 1957. You see it's filled in quite a bit in the back. Still not much here, but this little row of oak trees out front, growing really well. Still no park. We're not a park till the 70s. So not even 1972 really. This is more of like a motorcycle path that people have created. And notice now we have a lake and we have this interstate. Okay, so you can kind of see how the trees have expanded in less than the last 100 years. That was when I was born. It's a good year. And here, these are tree farms, like Christmas tree farms. So we had some pine trees up front, which you can still see some remnant of in the park. And this is in 1999. So this building was built or opened in 97. So we do have the nature center. We do have the roads. This is still just a field. They have the gun club over here. They had a Winchester gun club here for years. That's gone. They removed all the gun club stuff. But you can still find remnants of that out there. We've now restored it with money from the Fox Island Alliance. They've donated $8,000 to restore that into prairie. So that's really cool. Creating more diversity in habitats. You don't just have forests, you have lakes, you have wetlands, you have vernal pools, you have prairies. And the more diverse habitats you have, the more diverse wildlife you have. And so with this going on, people are very interested in how our wildlife is going to be affected. And so it keeps getting pushed off because we keep waiting for the loggers to leave. They thought they would be done in 2 months. And they started July 27th. So the storm was June 13th. We had to figure out and go through all the hoops with the nature preserve and everything else through the park board, and they approved it. And then July 27th was the first time they started logging. And so we're quite a bit past that 2-month mark, and it's just you cannot tell until you get back to how bad it is. The aerial photos help a little bit, but they don't really describe it. This is one of Nardi's soil microbe kind of soil biology photographs that he uses in his book, James Nardi. And I just like it because my husband's a soil scientist, so I'm always thinking about how we're affecting our soils, because that affects everything. It's growing from the soil, right? Or living in the soil. And so when we're talking about even like debris piles, what to do with them, ideally, I would love to mulch them up, spread the mulch out within an inch layer. That may not happen because we don't have mulching equipment that could go in there and eat one of those piles like that. And so we might have to burn it. If we burn it, that kills all the microbes and the mycelium, which is the roots for the fungi in that area. And you'll have a lot of nutrient in the ash, but there's not going to be anything there to work it into the soil or to absorb, with the roots. And so it'll be years before we'll have anything but the hardiest pioneer species, most likely invasives, come into that area where you burnt. We will still do some burning, but it'll be limited. And the rest of the piles will be left for wildlife piles, which will allow invasive plants to pop up around them. So, like I said, we prefer to mulch. Some of the people have said to scatter seeds directly into those areas. After we're done, just like overseed it with soft maple seeds or whatever. And that's what nature does. Nature overseeds in the hope that some will propagate. So we did have a Day of Caring group come out, and they helped Jeff with his Ormiston Mountain area. They helped remove some debris. They helped rake out the trails. There was a new trail created, so they adopted that and put some mulch on it. So they did a nice thing for us there, and I think he still has some volunteer activities that will need to be done to finish that out. But it looks pretty good. So this is one of the few areas in the park where we're not going to have 12-foot wide trails. And I think that's kind of neat. You kind of just have a little walking trail going up there. That is that little grove of oak trees you saw on the map, that little circle I was talking about. That's what that is. It's a sandy dune, small one, that has oak trees and it's been growing on it for over 100 years. Over on the Serval end of the property, if you go down Yanni Road further, there's a lot of cottonwoods and soft maples, wet woods. And when they went in there to take down some of the cottonwoods, I discovered that one of the cottonwood branches had a live honeybee hive in it. And so it just kind of reminded me, life is still going on. So this is the tree order, the actual order from the state nursery. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Funds is funding it. They've bought 7,100 trees for us, and we have 2 months to remove the debris piles in those areas that I've talked about, the 2-3 acre plus areas and the 12 acre area, before we can put 7,100 trees in. And we still only have a little track loader or the ground. So we're trying our best, but we'll see. We might have to nurse those trees in somewhere until we can get them planted. I would hate to do that because transplanting trees is harder to get them to grow. So, but we also have roads with holes in them and trails with holes in them that are still access roads. Like this is the lake road where a tree fell down. And so my maintenance guy's like, cut every tree away from the road so the next storm, this doesn't tear up the rest of the road. And he's trying to work out a deal with, well, he was trying to cross the road with E&D paving, but he's found another company that might give us some crushed concrete and things like that where we could fill in these holes. And then this honeysuckle, I took a picture of it. This thing was along Yanni Road, and it was like 20 feet high. I mean, this big around. And this is a shrub. So along the interstate back in when the park first opened, U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Soil Conservation Service, unfortunately at that time, they were all recommending planting these invasive shrubs. And they also included multiflora rose, and rose is a 4-letter word here. So, and they, so that's been growing for 20 years or more, and the ones along the interstate for 50 years, and seeding in the rest of the park. And so when people tell me that they love their honeysuckle or the burning bush, I just, oh my gosh, like just come on out, I'll show you what it can do to your woods. So like that one is just along Yanni Road. You can't even see anything. That's not an open woodland or a nice area to look at. And so now we're pricing out these. This is a tree planting tool, planter bar, and I've been conversing online with this guy, Ray Major from Trees from Seed. Really interesting guy. If you look at that Facebook page, he has all these videos on how to, you know, collect seed, how to store seed. He's not a big fan of storing. He likes to get it in the ground. But he has on, like, he's doing all these little research projects on how to keep squirrels away from his seed when he puts them in the ground. And just a really great guy. I think tomorrow he has a class he's offering online as well. But I would definitely check into that if you're interested into trees and planting and how to propagate. So here's my contact information. If you want to help plant trees in April, fill out a volunteer app, get it to Carol Gam, and she clears it pretty quickly. So.